Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Radhadana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Radhadana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravana Yamuna Tiravana Jaya Radha Maharaja Punjabi Hari Jaya Radha Maharaja Punjabi Hari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Rajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravana Yamuna Tiravana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hari Go, Hari Go, Hari Go, Hari Go. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranyadam Nina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manavishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Swapadantika Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuktapadakamana Shri Guru Vaishnavascha Shri Rupam Sagyagatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Samadutam Harijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhamritam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Kristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Vaschakadeshata Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopikakanta Radhakanta Namostute Takta Kanchana Gauramvi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Pranamami Haripriye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama. Once more. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye Nashta Prayeshvavanneshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Grantara Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I think I'm going to keep this here. I became attached to it. Thank you. So today, on this auspicious Ekadashi day, what is it, Parama Ekadashi, I think? We're reading Srimad-Bhagavatam. How fortunate we are. No? Yeah. And we're reading from the 3rd canto. No, we're not. We're reading from the 11th canto. Chapter 3, Liberation from the Illusory Energy. And we'll read the verse and purport and briefly, and then I will seg into a work in progress, which I'll explain when we come to it, which is related. It's about the Bhagavatam. Okay. So let's chant. We have the verse. Sarvatratmeshvaran viksham. Sarvatratmeshvaran viksham. Kaivalyam aniketatam. Kaivalyam aniketatam. Vivikta chira vasanam. Vivikta chira vasanam. Santosham yena kenachit. Santosham yena kenachit. Sarvatratmeshvaram viksham. Kaivalyam aniketatam. Vivikta chira vasanam. Santosham yena kenachit. Others can chant. Sarvatra, everywhere. Atma, for one's true self. Ishvara, and for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anviksham, meditation by keeping continuously in view. Kaivalyam, solitude. Aniketatam, having no fixed residence. Vivikta chira, scraps of cloth found in unfrequented places. Vasanam, wearing. Santosham, satisfaction. Yena kena chit. With anything. Translation and purport by the followers of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki. Translation: one should practice meditation by constantly seeing oneself to be an eternal cognizant spirit soul and seeing the Lord to be the absolute controller of everything. To increase one's meditation, one should live in a secluded place and give up false attachment to one's home and household paraphernalia, giving up the decorations of the temporary material body. One should dress himself with scraps of cloth found in rejected places, or with the bark of trees. In this way, one should learn to be satisfied in any material condition. That's what we call a tall order. Purport: Kaivalyam, or living in a secluded place, indicates a place free from material disturbances. Therefore, one should live in the association of Vaishnavas, where the common goal is advancement in Krishna consciousness, especially in the Kali Yuga. If one tries to remain physically isolated from all others, the result will be degradation or insanity. Aniketatam means that one should not be intoxicated by the ephemeral satisfaction of one's, quote, home sweet home, unquote, which will vanish at any moment by the unforeseen circumstances produced by one's previous activities. In this age, it is not actually possible to dress in tree bark in modern cities, nor to wear mere scraps of cloth. Somewhere I read the way it worked with tree bark, it was not only in India practice, but in apparently prehistoric times. They take the bark and they pound it for a long time to make it soft and flexible. So you can actually make some sort of cloth out of it. Probably depends on the sort of tree, and it's hard to imagine that this would be comfortable. Previously, human culture accommodated those practicing tapasya, or penances, in the interest of spiritual advancement. In this age, however, the most urgent necessity is for preaching the message of Bhagavad Gita throughout human society. Therefore, it is recommended that Vaishnavas dress with clean and neat cloth, covering the body decently so that the conditioned souls will not be frightened or repulsed by the severe penances of the Vaishnavas. Yeah, can imagine going in. What's the next town? Durbui. Going into Durbui wearing tree bark. Might not be appreciated. They might be frightened. Call the police. In the Kali Yuga, the conditioned souls are extremely attached to material sense gratification. And extreme austerities are not appreciated, but are instead considered abominable denials of the flesh. Of course, austerity is required for spiritual advancement, but the practical example set by Srila Prabhupada in successfully spreading the Krishna consciousness movement was that all material things should be used to attract people to Krishna consciousness. Therefore, Vaishnavas may at times adopt ordinary dress to serve the higher principle of distributing Krishna consciousness. In any case, one should learn to be satisfied in any material situation so as to prepare for the moment of death. According to Bhagavad Gita, at the time of death, the particular consciousness we have created in this life will carry us to our future situation. Therefore, human life can be seen as a type of practice for successfully fixing one's mind on the absolute truth during the severe trials of death. And so ends the purport. And the verse again, one should practice meditation by constantly seeing oneself to be an eternal, cognizant spirit soul, and seeing the Lord to be the absolute controller of everything. To increase one's meditation, one should live in a secluded place and give up false attachment to one's home and household paraphernalia. Giving up the decorations of the temporary material body, one should dress himself with scraps of cloth found in rejected places or with the bark of trees. In this way, one should learn to be satisfied in any material situation. This verse is following a kind of turning point verse, verse 21. The sage Prabhuddha Muni, after speaking strongly about the futility of material life, he has a tasmat verse. Tasmat means therefore. And so it's a kind of logical connection. Tasmat gurum prapadyeta jigyasu shreya uttamam shabde parecha nishnatam brahmanyupa upa shamashrayam. Therefore, any person who seriously desires real happiness must seek a bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of him by initiation. That's a little bit adding to the Sanskrit, but okay. The qualifications of the bona fide guru is that he has realized the conclusions of the scriptures by deliberation and is able to convince others of these conclusions. Such great personalities who have taken shelter of the Supreme Godhead, leaving aside all material considerations, should be understood to be bona fide spiritual masters. And then what's following is instructions, in a sense, as if the spiritual master is giving the instructions. So, yes, take shelter of the Guru, as Srila Rupa Goswami also instructs as step one in spiritual life, and then follow the instructions. And then we're getting a series of instructions, what to do. And one of them is to wear the bark of trees. Well, or not. Some instruction may be relevant for us and some may not. But the general theme, we can say, is renunciation and austerity. And this is a repeated theme throughout the Bhagavatam. And that leads me into my topic that I wanted to share with you. And so for this, we'll use a bit more digital technology. Wow, That sounds like it's from the Middle Ages. I've been studying the story of Bharata Maharaja, who renounces his kingdom after 10 million years to take up yoga. And I'm preparing a presentation for an academic conference, which will happen later this summer. Okay, now there's always a problem getting a Mac to do a full screen on these machines, so I'm just gonna not even try. But this will work okay. We can make it a bit bigger. There, okay. We can move this down. Yeah, and we can, I think we can get rid of this. Yeah. Okay, there's a conference that happens every 3 years. Some scholars, Sanskrit scholars, come together in Dubrovnik in Croatia.
If you click on that icon, it will go on slideshow.
It should, but my experience is it blacks out. We can try it, but we may have to start everything over. That's what I'm afraid of. But I think that's big enough. I'll make the whole thing bigger, like this. Yeah, it's something about Macs and these things. Maybe I just don't know the trick. Yeah. But that's big enough, right? Yeah. So there's the Dubrovnik International Conference on the Sanskrit Epics and Puranas. And I've been participating in that conference a few times, 3 times in the past. And my proposal for this time's been accepted. The theme for this particular conference is water and forests. They have a different theme each time. And so I thought, well, Jada Bharata teaches Rahugana about material life by giving this extended analogy of the forest. The merchant seeking pleasure and seeking gain in the forest. Some years ago at this same conference, I did a presentation doing a rhetorical analysis of a section of the Vishnu Purana, and dare I say, they liked it. One scholar said, your presentation was the best one of the whole week. So that encouraged me, and I thought, let's do some more of this. Rhetoric, what is rhetoric? It is language for convincing, for persuasion. And in early times, in Middle Ages, and I think earlier in Europe, this was an essential part of education. There was what was called the trivium. Trivium consisted of 3 components: grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And then there was the quadrivium, which was different kinds of mathematics. But rhetoric was considered essential for an educated person to be educated in. So I did some reflection on this story, which I think you're all familiar with, so I won't linger on the story, but it's a very fascinating, what I came to appreciate as a story of several reversals. And I won't go through all of it, but these are the sort of components, the episodes of rehearsal. The king, Bharata, he becomes a yogi, so that's a kind of reversal. The yogi becomes, Yogi Bharata becomes compassionate Bharata when he saves this baby deer. The wild deer, this deer fawn, there's also a kind of change. He becomes, I like to say, a semi-domesticated deer, from being a wild deer to a not fully domesticated. And Bharata, who becomes himself a deer, is remorseful Bharata now, and he becomes a kind of domesticated yogi deer. Because he remembers his past life, and he lives in proximity to some yogis, some sadhus, some sages. He's something like a domesticated yogi deer, if you like. And then the next stage is that this yogi deer is reborn, and he becomes a brahmana. But what sort of brahmana? He, by choice, is now called Jada Bharata, Jada meaning dull. And then Jada Bharata, there's another reversal when he becomes a potential sacrificial animal victim, when these gundas, Shri Radha Gopinath Ki Jai, when these gundas, capture him and want to sacrifice him. And then Kali's so-called devotees, another reversal, a very dramatic reversal, they become her sacrificial victims. They wanted to sacrifice Jada Bharata, but there's a turning of the tables. And then there's another change, a kind of reversal, when Jada Bharata becomes a forced laborer. He becomes one of the palanquin carriers for the king, King Rahugana. And then comes again a rather dramatic reversal when Jada Bharata is recognized as an exalted sage by the king. And then Rahugana himself becomes elevated by hearing the teachings of Jada Bharata. And what he's hearing is this extended analogy, this extended analogy, that's maybe an allegory, of the merchant in the forest and all the misfortunes that happened to him. So that's the sort of reversal structure, you can say. And I suggest then, this gets a little bit abstract, but one scholar has pointed out that in the Rig Veda, there's a kind of basic metaphor of creation of a story is churning. So it's a kind of a sort of basic idea that emerges out of the Rig Veda, that by process of churning, there is another sort of process, and that is the creation of a narrative, of a story. Well, it occurred to me that in the story of Bharata, with all of these reversals going on, that is very much like churning, because when you churn butter, you're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So that is then producing the story of Bharata. Okay, so what? In the in the Bhagavata Purana, the Srimad-Bhagavatam, churning of the ocean of milk is there famously, and what is produced in that churning is Amrita, the nectar of immortality. In the Bharata story, what is the nectar produced? It's the wisdom which is gained and shared by Bharata and received by Rahugana, and importantly, it's received by those who hear or read that story. And this is where we come back to the point of rhetoric. Rhetoric is about language, speech, which persuades. So we become persuaded as Rahugana is persuaded. So the rhetorical message is the nectar of immortality bearing wisdom is gained by hearing, by reading the story, which is a churning process in this particular case. Okay, well, then I suggest one can consider what I call rhetorical strands, threads that are running through. And here we go, we kind of come back to the Western tradition, starting with Aristotle, who, among many things he spoke about, one was rhetoric, and he identifies three essential components of rhetoric, which is language to persuade. The first is ethos. Ethos is about, first and foremost, the person speaking. What is the qualification of this person I'm hearing from? Why should I bother listening to this person? Well, in the story of Bharata, in the first several verses in chapter 7 of Canto 5, we hear how pious he is, and we hear about his 5 sons, and they are associated with 5 sense objects, which then he becomes detached from. We hear of his perfect kingship, and all of that culminates in his rejecting rejecting of his kingship and his fully embracing of devotional meditation. And this is exemplified. His devotional meditation is mentioned. He is offering his food to the Lord, and of course it is vegetal food that he is offering. So, in a sense, the message of this part of the story can be put into a little formula. Pravritti marga plus bhakti leads to nivritti. He was devotional as a king, and that led to his renunciation. And then Bharata as a deer, when he becomes a deer, he has nivritti sangha, which prepares him for his next life. So all of this can be thought of in terms of ethos. Then the second strand of this scheme that I'm suggesting, and I'm looking for critique, so feel free to say, no, this doesn't work, because this is a work in progress, and I'm presenting it to a large extent for my own benefit, to get response or questioning and so on. So the rhetorical strand refers to the second of the three elements according to Aristotle, which is pathos. Pathos. Pathos means emotion. So we have three sort of moments in the story of Bharat, of an expression of pathos. There's Bharat being moved to compassion by this helpless fawn that's just been born. Its mother has just died. And he feels some conflict at that time. Should I not take care? I should take care, because compassion is required, and I feel compassion. And you could say this carries over from his successful kingship. He feels a need to care for others. This caring becomes more intense, and it becomes so intense that he becomes greatly anxious for the deer when the deer is out of his sight. So much is his anxiety that, of course, his absorption and anxiety, that he becomes a deer in his next life. And then the third strand in Aristotle's system is logos, reasoning. And here I include these elements. Bharata as a deer remembers his past life. Bharata as a brahmana feigns being dull, or Jada. Bharata as sacrificial victim accepts his fate, and then acceptance of fate yields divine protection. Divine in this case, Kali. And then finally Jada Bharata teaches Rahugana, and the entire cycle of how many chapters? At least 4, I think, where he's teaching Rahugana is logos, where he's simply teaching and Rahugana is listening. Chapters? I also am tempted to reflect on what are called fractals and what I'm calling rhetorical fractals. Do you know what a fractal is? No. A fractal is, in geometry, a shape which, I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly, but it's a shape where you take a portion of that shape, and that's the same shape, and you can go within that, and there's another repetition, so it can expand or contract, like crystals. Crystals expand, and you have the same shape repeating in several ways. So what I want to suggest is that the Bhagavatam as a whole has rhetorical fractals, which is to say, take, for example, the theme of renunciation and simple living and high thinking. It's there all over the Bhagavatam in so many forms. And so it appears also in the Bharata story. There are fractals, as I see it, within each of these aspects of the Bharat story, within the ethos passages, the pathos passages, and the logos passages. So you find repetitions of all of these elements within. A second angle on these fractals, there are rhetorics of passion and dispassion. Within the story, the pathos, you could say, is like passion, his intense feeling for the deer is a kind of, and there's verses which describe him feeling viraha, separation from the deer, which very much anticipates the description of the gopis in Vrindavan in the 10th canto. So that's a kind of fractal. So, and then there's dispassion. So Bharata's sense of compassion and attachment to the deer fawn is an expression of passion. His, what I'm calling viraha bhava, in relation to the deer fawn. And then after all of this, and he's carrying the palanquin, can we think of Jada Bharata's irregular walking, which becomes a problem for Rahugana, which we come to learn is because he's caring for the ants that are on the pathway. He doesn't want to step on the ants. So that's also pathos. He must have some feeling for them. And then when Jada Bharata finally speaks, he hasn't been speaking since he was born, apparently. Or if he has, it hasn't been very clear. So finally now he's speaking, and he's speaking very powerfully. He is speaking truth to power, because Rahugana is the king. So he's speaking straightforwardly and purposefully, and that is also a kind of passion. And finally, Rahugana's resolve, he expresses also in a kind of, in a positive sense, passionate way, his resolve to submit and listen. And then as far as dispassion goes, we have, of course, the renunciation of the kingdom of Bharata, his dispassion as he's living out the life of a deer, and his silent tolerance of abuses. A third sort of fractals, there are reversals in the forest story, in the extended allegory. And I couldn't resist adding Charlotte's term, natality. Births and deaths and possibly natality. I have to think about this. I haven't worked on it yet, but I just threw it in there. These are, coming back to the idea of reversals, the rhetoric of reversals. So within now as a fractal coming within the story of this allegory of the merchant in the forest, he's experiencing one reversal after another. So all of this, I want to suggest, is sort of adding up in a cumulative way. The message, which is for the purpose of persuasion. And this is pretty much as far as I got on this. This is jumping to a point of conclusion. This question has been raised in a book by one scholar, in a book called The Theoretical Individual. To what extent has human history provided empirical evidence for the capacity of an individual to exert meaningful suasion over her or his species? If so, by what means? If not, what then? The context he's raising this in, from other books I know, he's very concerned about the degradation of our environment, of the global environmental condition, and he's asking this question, okay, can we persuade human beings to actually do something meaningful? So it's a kind of a tough question. And I guess I want to suggest, yes, the Bhagavatam can persuade us. Grantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. And that's what I had in mind to share. If any comments or questions are there about rhetoric or otherwise, yes.
Just to offer what you requested. So
Yes.
little feedback.
Thank you.
Is it safe to say that fractals are equivalent to, I was thinking of these Russian dolls, you have dolls embedded in dolls embedded in dolls. Is it like that? Is that what you meant to convey?
Something like that, yes. Yeah, what are those dolls called? Huh? Matrushki. Yeah? Yeah, that may be one way of thinking of fractals.
Because you said a figure within a figure.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I may,
Please.
a fractal is a unit that has the same shape as the whole shape.
Right. Oh, we got the exact definition. Thank you. So it's a unit that has the same shape as the whole shape.
And it creates the whole, but in it has the same shape as the whole,
Yeah.
and the same value belongs to.
Yeah. So I think this applies. I think this is one way, for whatever it's worth. I think it's one way of appreciating the structure, if you like, of the Bhagavatam. And it may help us to appreciate how and why there is a sense of repetition in the Bhagavatam. It's there to persuade. Yeah.
I was persuaded by your presentation because it was mercifully short. You covered many, many points in a very short time.
Well, that's in part because these presentations at this conference, they're always short. They give you exactly 20 minutes and then 10 minutes for discussion. And there's always a timekeeper. Yeah. Thank you. David.
Thank you very much. I have three short questions.
A short question.
One is an observation from slide 5.
Oh.
Maybe then this is...
Oh, I skipped over one. So this one? Or this one?
Yes.
This one.
So here, more like a critical appraisal. You mentioned pathos, so we are speaking of emotions here. And then the second factor about his absorption and care, it seems more like a verb rather than an emotion. So what are your thoughts on that? It seems like an action rather than an emotion. And I was thinking how perhaps the remorse and repentance that Bharat had could be classified as an emotion. But how do you understand this absorption and the care as an emotion?
Okay. I guess I would think of it as both and. Caring, yes, it's the activities of caring, but it's also a, what's the word? It's a disposition also, and a disposition in relation to a particular person, usually, or group of persons, and that, in my understanding involves something that could be called pathos. Yeah.
And also in slide 9, when you were describing dispassion.
Let's see if I think that. This one? Previous?
Yeah. So I just wanted to understand your intention for usage of the word dispassion compared to maybe something more...
Dispassion, it's just a term that's often used in English, it's very close, I would say, to detachment. But it works as an opposite to passion. There's passion, there's dispassion. And yeah, I don't know how exactly it fits, but it struck me that it works here.
It's not one of the modes of nature, dispassion.
Dispassion is not one of the modes of nature. No, it's not. It's not a rajas. Yeah. Yeah, I'm using, Western terms here, and then aligning Western terms, English terms with Sanskrit terms is not always a happy fit. Yeah. Bhagavati.
Krishna Maharaj, thank you. Definitely gives a different way of looking at a storyline in the Bhagavatam. I have one question about logos, the points that you mentioned. And this might be just my own lack of intelligence, I couldn't see how the protection fitted in there. There was everything else was like the understanding, but then the protection, I couldn't see it fitted in there. But maybe it's because Bharata Maharaja knew he was going to get that protection, but I couldn't see that part of logos.
No, I'm not sure which slide this was. This would be in this one? No, pathos, logos. Let's see. Acceptance of fate yields divine protection. Well, here I'm taking it again in sort of rhetorical terms that we are being taught by example. In this case, Jada Bharata is showing this sense of acceptance of fate. And so that becomes an example, and as an example, a kind of lesson. And that lesson is taught through the story, especially at the moment when Kali suddenly jumps out and grabs the sword and starts chopping off heads. So it's not, you could say it's not an explicit logos, but it's within the narrative.
So then could I understand it as, because the other things are more directed
More,
for Bharat,
yeah.
that part is our logos,
Yeah.
it's our understanding?
Yeah,
But
we could
get
say
from
like
it.
that. Yeah. Yeah, so we get it in different ways. The final chapters, when Jada Bharata is speaking to Rahugana, that's where we get it all. You could say everything is spelled out explicitly. And that's, you could say, most explicitly logos.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj. Recently I was listening to a lecture, and it was a disciple of Radhadesh Swami, I forget his name, something with Vrindavan. And the title was, I'm turning it, the title was, Love Cannot Wait, Purity Can. and I'm adding sometimes. So I think this applies very much to this story of Bharata Maharaj, and also to me it's a very important topic for devotees, for us. And I discussed it with my godbrother also, and he immediately said, yeah, our process doesn't start from rules, it starts from bhakti.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to hear you commenting on this. Please, thank you.
In relation to the story of Bharata Maharaj, specifically, anything I want to say. It makes a nice slogan. Love cannot wait, purity can wait. Was that it? Yeah, I haven't heard that lecture, but I think I understand the point, where the idea is that purity is something you have to follow rules in order to get, but love is beyond that. I suppose that's one of those statements that you can take it in a helpful way or in a way which could be misunderstood. You could take it, okay, love is first, so we're just going to forget about rules altogether because love is first and purity is last. Where we understand, I would say that purity is supportive of and facilitating love, because pure love of the pure heart is what we're aiming for. And pure heart is facilitated by, we hope, by various things, starting with taking a shower in the morning. But Jada Bharata probably didn't take a shower every morning. Especially as a, well, I don't know, as a deer, maybe he took a swim every morning. Yeah, it's that balance issue which Rupa Goswami gives us in this rather cryptic way in the Nectar of Instruction. Niyamagraha, with its double meaning. Don't overdo it with regulations and don't underdo it with regulations, but get the balance. Otherwise, the context is things which go against the cultivation of bhakti. Otherwise, Shadbir Bhakti Vinashyati, bhakti will be destroyed if there's not that balance. But it's always nice, and that's a kind of rhetorical title, you know. One way that rhetoric works is gives us snappy phrases. We go, yeah, that's it. And that works very well, and that's a good thing. That can help us to find a balance which we may lose in the web of rules and regulations. Yeah. Nice. Thank you.
Yes, in slide 5, you're speaking about Nivritti Marga, and it comes from Pravritti Marga plus Bhakti, and then it comes to Nivritti.
Where was it?
5. Pravritti Marga plus Bhakti becomes Nivritti.
Yeah. In this particular story, that was my reading.
10 million years it was
Yeah,
king?
yeah. 1,000 times, it says, what was it? Sahasra, Ayudha, I don't remember. But it's 10 million. Yeah. So
his reign as king was like following Pravritti Marga?
well, it's essentially, it's the, how to say, it's the trope, it's the essential idea that anyone engaged in ruling must be doing pravritti just means engagement, and it tends to mean therefore worldly engagement. So the fact that he's a ruler, engaged in ruling his kingdom, that's pravritti, marga, essentially. Yeah. Anita.
It's more like an appreciation and also a request to see if my understanding is correct. But the idea of the fractals, can that be linked to the spirals that you mentioned in the seminar?
Oh.
The seminars that you just conducted this.
Fractals and spirals. Yeah, geometry. I have to think about that, how they might relate. The spiral idea is just one way of seeing how the Bhagavatam develops from the first canto through the 11th canto, I would say. It's kind of, there's a repetition and expansion, and the fractals is not so much about progression from before to after, but it's more, I don't know, it's kind of a stepping back and seeing repetitions of, in this context, elements for persuasion. Yeah.
And also, is there also a parallel between the churning as well as the digesting?
Oh, churning and digesting. We talked about digesting in our seminar the last 3 days. Digesting. Why not? Yes, could be an interesting connection there. Yeah, thank you.
And my appreciation is that I recently heard from a speaker in the UK how the Bhagavatam is our story. It's just that we've forgotten our role in it.
Mm.
And it's nice to hear about these different narratives to kind of tackle that hierarchical or linear way of seeing stories. Especially the story of Jada Bharata. The way I usually hear about it is it's kind of like a sad story. He was very close to the goal, but then he got distracted. However, I always felt there was more to the story. His compassion is worth really analysing and absorbing.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yes, as I see it, from a perspective that I've been thinking and writing about, his failure, because of his distraction, actually facilitates his greater success, because having experienced becoming a deer and now being a yogi deer, facilitates him having compassion, having sensitivity to all living beings, and therefore he can be concerned about ants, where it's not clear that he would have had that previously. Potentially, yes, but he actually shows it. And then it qualifies, all of that qualifies him to be the powerful sage that Rahugana is willing to listen to. So it comes back to the rhetorical point of ethos. Rahugana recognized, oh, this is an advanced sage. I have to listen to him. All of that's because he has undergone what he's undergone. Yeah. Charlotte, I think. Whoops.
Hey Krishna, I was thinking from the last slide where you said about the capacity to exert meaningful suasion over other species.
Yeah.
And I was thinking like how...
Not other species.
of one's species.
One's own
Yes,
species.
one's own species. And to inspire them to change something in their behavior or their way of conceiving their actions in the world. And so I was thinking how your vision of rhetoric would link to that, and because I have a sense in which like an external rhetoric, which feels a little bit like what you are describing, needs to align with a sense of internal rhetoric. Like there has to be a sense of alignment with one's own ethos, pathos, logos, for it to work as a rhetoric. So I guess like each individual has an internal rhetoric, and the external rhetoric sort of needs to align with that. So there is like a movement that goes in both ways. And I guess it connects to what Anissa was saying, how these stories inspire our own compassion. And so I was wondering if you could say something about this capacity to exert meaningful suasion, in a sense that you also transform one's internal rhetoric by suading about the external rhetoric.
Ooh, okay. Did you get that? It's starting to sound like another dimension of fractals. We have suasion and persuasion within and without, and alignment. It's a nice thought, which now I have to digest. Yeah, thank you. I can't really say. The question I've thrown here on the end, I came across it and I thought, okay, this is a very good question to possibly end my presentation with, because I wanted to sort of broaden out and say, because these Sanskrit scholars, they can really dig into details of details of details in the things that they study, and it's all very interesting, but then I often wonder, yeah, but so what? And that's kind of what I want to call attention to here. I think there's a bigger question. And of course, I also want to call attention to the Bhagavatam, that it's something special. In these conferences, there's one or two other scholars who study the Bhagavatam, but most of them, they study Mahabharata or Ramayana or some other Puranas. So I like to kind of come there and say, hey, don't forget the Bhagavatam. Yes?
I was in relation to a question that Stoker Krishna had about Pariti Mark plus Bhakti, creation of Riti, and then also in like this part. When we look at our preaching, like ISKCON preaching, how far can we say, okay, you know, we give people, they live outside, we give them the holy name, we give them some bhakti, and then and ultimately something good will come out of that. It was like Bharata Maharaja, she said he had many years to kind of practice that bhakti to come to nirviti. So how far will that work for our own preaching? How do we have to adjust that? Because we sometimes say that you just do your thing and then you add bhakti, you add the holy name to it, you add some bhakti to it.
Yeah, another thing to think about. As far as our preaching, on the street and our book distribution, prasadam, Ratayatra, all of these things are exposing people. I was teaching a course at University of Florida. It's already 20 years ago. And I had put aside in this course on Indian religion, that was the course. And I gave myself one day to talk about Mahabharata. And one day means 50 minutes, the class time, 50 minutes. How do you talk about Mahabharata to students who have no idea, they've never heard of it before? How do you talk about it in 50 minutes? I did my best. Then afterwards, it so happened on that day, my godbrother, Stita Di Muni Prabhu, was sitting in on the class. He was curious, he wanted to sit in, so he did. Afterward, I was lamenting to him. I said, what's the use of this? And his comment was, don't worry about it. It's putting it on their radar. In other words, it's a blip on the screen, but it's a blip, it's something. In terms of eternity, okay, that's something. It's something, not nothing. And so we're doing the best we can. And for some souls out there, the touch, the blip, will go deeper sooner than for others. In that regard, we have to, I think, also maintain some detachment to the result. Knowing that Lord Chaitanya has his plan. Yeah. On that not so happy note, we can end. Thank you all so much for your kind attention. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Radha Gokulananda ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaur Premanande.